Hi Luxury Home Show, I'm Abigail Ahern, designer and retailer. I live in East London in Dalston and welcome to my home. Come inside. When you step inside, it's a bit like an Aladdin's cave. Sometimes if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just sit here and all I see is my garden and trees because I planted, like you'll see in a bit, 14 trees, and they just sway in the winter and it's just, I love it. You're constantly being pulled into the next room, and that, it sounds really weird to say, but that kind of makes the heartbeat raise a bit and you just feel super elevated. Our house was built in 1860, so it's a Victorian house, and when we bought it, I can't tell you the state it was in. This front yard was a carport, there was no planting, it was painted orange, and so basically I wanted it to feel like a really beautiful London townhouse. So I painted the whole exterior in a lovely paint colour by Frow & Ball called London Clay, took out the carport and planted a garden. So when I'm in the kitchen, because my kitchen is through there and I'm cooking, I feel like I'm in a forest because I've got all these grasses and mahonia plants and fig trees and lush greenery, which makes me feel like I'm not in London at all. It's like my own magical little space. I've kept the planting really restricted. I've really played around with scale by adding some supersized pieces, and it just feels, for me, uber sophisticated and incredibly tranquil, and a place that I never ever want to leave. When you step inside, it's a bit like an Aladdin's cave. So I'm quite a maximalist, but in a very curated way. I'm playing with lots of different styles, so there isn't one particular style. I'm kind of meshing trad and boho and glamorous, and it's all kind of put in this soup of my kind of brain, so it feels incredibly relaxed and it's got a bit of a glamorous edge, and I cannot wait to show you more. The hallway, now Victorian houses have such a narrow hallway, I can almost do this. So it was really key to me to give it this sense of grandeur. So the first thing I did was painted the walls in an old colour of ours called Bedford Brown, and made sure that all the trim, all the skirts, all the floorboards and all the ceiling was exactly the same colour, because that gives me this sense of grandeur. When you paint the ceiling in a different colour, you kind of see where the walls stop and it kind of makes your room feel a little bit smaller, but when you paint them the same colour, you can't quite see and it all blurs out and it looks taller than it really is. Then I wanted to give it a bit of a wow, because I need every room in my house to sort of be sprinkled with this fairy dust magic to feel magical. So in order to do that, I've got to play with scale. So I added a really supersized convex mirror here, and then peppered the hallway throughout with some really large art. And that sense of scale brings immediate grandeur. So even when hallways are not very big or rooms are quite small, just playing around with scale and adding something supersized literally elevates any room. Lighting is super key to how I decorate. I want little pockets of glow. So a little lamp here and a supersized lamp here. Now, in order to make it feel not too chaotic, because I decorate with quite a lot of stuff, I really have to restrict that colour palette. So there's not a lot of colours going on in this room, but I really wanted the hallway to very much reflect the outdoors. So I come from outdoors where there's trees on the street, or I look through to my garden over there and there's a load of green trees and it's quite earthy. And so I wanted the vibe in the hallway to literally mirror that. My trick to decorating is you're constantly being pulled into the next room or out the door, because that looks so cool. And that, it sounds really weird to say, but that kind of makes the heartbeat raise a bit and you just feel super elevated. Then I added a bit of vintage, because, you know, we all need vintage in our lives because it just adds such a unique vibe. Pattern is really important to me in hallways because they're so narrow. They can just feel a bit bland. But when you add a pattern to your runner or up the stairwell, for example, it just kind of lifts the spirits a bit. And basically, I just want you, when you enter this house, to go, oh my God, I'm so desperate to get into the next room. And it's not just a space that we all run through in order to get into the next room. So I kind of put my living room hat on, and anything that I have in a living room, like botanicals and lighting and candles, for example, I plonk in my hallway, and that to me is what makes it feel really magical, so it doesn't feel disconnected with every room in the house. We leave the hallway and we go into my studio living room, which is painted and decorated in a different way, but it very much connects. Let me show you. This is it's a bit of an indulgence, this room. This is my studio living room. So I work in that room, and this is kind of my breakout inspo room. It's not our main living room. It's more of a room for like reading books and just chilling. Myrtle, this is her favorite room in the house, is our dog. She's 7 years old, and this chair is one of her favorites because it just wraps her up in this cozy little snug. What was really key for me in this room is it's not the biggest of rooms. You know, we live in a Victorian house, and therefore some of the rooms aren't that big, but I needed it to feel incredibly cozy. So I've gone out of my way to overdose on texture. A lot of the armchairs are covered in either a teddy fabric or a boucle, so they feel like you constantly want to just literally stroke them. Or they're faux fur, like this one here. The rug is really shaggy. The thing with texture, I think it's like one of those under-considered components. It adds such soulful warmth to a room, and a lot of the time I think we tend to neglect it, but when we add it, it just makes spaces feel really magical. Because I need all of the rooms as you transition through the house to connect, I have made a real point of using very similar furnishings in each room. So I have a vintage console out here, and I have a vintage console in here. I have the same shaggy lamp that's out there in here. So there's a real connection. You'll notice that this room is painted in a different color to the hallway, but it isn't jarring. It's just a step lighter. So it's inky brown in the hallway and a little bit pinky in my studio. Then I've kind of overdosed on lighting. As the sun transitions around the house and the light gets lower and lower and lower, in the evening you have all of these pockets of really beautiful soft glow. And because I'm decorating with quite a lot of pieces, in order for it not to feel chaotic, again, I've really restricted the palette. So there's browns and there's creams and there's a little bit of green and there's a little bit of pink, but that is pretty much it. Again, I'm very obsessed with things feeling handmade because they add such an organic vibe. It's like this sculpture here, this vintage kind of sculpture over here that I picked up at a flea market. They just kind of give my space just an air of uniqueness. And then obviously, being a retailer and in the homeware biz, a lot of these things are samples that have then gone into production. So this coffee table started as a sample. It's now in production. There's lots of vases that are about to go into production that I'm constantly, it's a bit like a laboratory, this room. I constantly try things out to see how it works. But I think it's just one of the most relaxing because there's no TV. There's just music and books and magazines, and I can just chill, light a fire in the winter, look at the garden. Yeah, it's one of my most favorite rooms in the house, actually. When we first bought the house, there were just holes in the wall. There was none of these plaster fireplaces. So I just sourced a load of them and put it in front of the fireplace, and it really grounds the room. I painted it out the same color as the walls, so that it's just, there's no kind of jarring color between the two. Laid it up with some botanicals, some really super cool earthy vases, a little bit of art. And it's just one of those places in the winter that I absolutely love to hang out by with you. When we moved into this house, this was all boxed up. So when we just opened it up, it just makes such a lovely connection. And this is the space where I spend 13, 14 hours a day at my desk working. But I love this room because although it's my studio, I think because I've incorporated so many interior things, it just doesn't feel quite so officey. So, old IKEA desk, when Elsa Crawford did a collaboration with IKEA and she made everything out of cork, obsessed, and put it in front of this big bookcase here, which is full of kind of inspirational images and lots of things that inspire. And then I supersized the lamps. So both of them are vintage. I got this in Columbia Road and I got this in Columbia Road. So I'm a bit obsessed with lighting and these pockets of glow. And then kind of, I used to be an interior designer in America many years ago, and the Americans really inspired me to kind of put things on the outside of your bookcase, like lighting and art, to just kind of really soften it up. So I've kind of gone with that vibe. I've painted the room in a different colour to my studio living room, but again, it feels very connected. So each room, as you transition from one room to another, doesn't jar, it kind of really flows. Rugs are really integral to how I decorate, particularly rugs with pattern. I have a bit of aversion to carpet, so I never want carpet to cover the whole floor. So I kind of play around with lots of different sizes of rugs and just float them throughout the whole house, which you'll see as we kind of continue along the tour. And then again, this chair was from a really incredible brand. I don't think it's around anymore, called Card & Canati, and it's velvet, and it's just the most relaxing chair. And sometimes if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just sit here and all I see is my garden and trees, because I planted, like you'll see in a bit, 14 trees, and they just sway in the winter, and it's just, I love it. The house ended at this point here. So I knew from my time in America, where I worked as an interior designer, designing houses around the Great Lakes. They were glass houses. I worked for this incredible architectural company, and they had a lot of glass, and there was this real connection between indoor and outdoor. So I knew when looking for a property, this was about 23 years ago, I wanted a house where I would literally be able to do the very same thing, how the outdoors would literally be very integral to my inside space. So removed the back wall, got planning permission to do this addition. The windows are Crittall, which I absolutely love because they frame the garden. Really played around with scale, but I'll talk about that when we go into the garden. And basically, it really opened up the whole house and made it feel a lot more grand. Then I had this huge kind of opening here, and I wanted to put a really beautiful chandelier. So it took me years to find the chandelier I liked, and I stumbled across an artist called Jo Whiting in Richmond. It took her 6 months to make this chandelier, and it's made of porcelain, and she literally cut out each piece and rolled it in a cloth to give it a texture, and it just kind of frames that window and looks really beautiful, particularly at night as the light drops. So again, everything in my house actually is super obsessed with texture, because texture is such a grounding proponent and it makes homes feel so soulful. So we're leaving the work zone and now we're going to the lower ground floor, which is where my favourite space in the whole property, where I hang out, relax, cook and generally chill. This is the den. This space took a hell of a lot of work because it really wasn't working. So we painted the house out, moved in, and I just felt it was lacking kind of charisma. So something that caused my husband, and he nearly divorced me, a lot of issues, was I wanted more texture. So we just plastered everything and painted everything. And I'm like, no, it doesn't look cool enough. So then I wanted to clad the whole fireplace in old London brick, because it's old, it's London, and it's just got this lovely vibe. And so we did it, and I absolutely am obsessed with it, because I don't really need to do a lot with it. It just kind of looks really beautiful and cool. So the fireplace was all bricked up after we'd plastered and painted, and then I wanted it to be a little zone. So I've kind of, a lot of people would think it might be a bit too much, but it really works for us, is to create a little kind of conversational nook overlooking the fire. So this is kind of a real winter living room. Have a glass of wine, have a fire on. It just feels super cozy. There's some books behind me and it feels really relaxing. And I'm always here before I transition into the kind of the main living room in the next part of the house. But it's a really lovely look of mine because it just feels incredibly cozy. Again, I've used a little bit more colour in this lower ground space because I don't want every room to be the same colour and I don't want every room to look the same. So as I come into each room, I want to feel that I'm in a different space. It's very easy to just paint everything the same colour and constantly repeat the same kind of furnishings, but I needed it to feel a point of difference. So I've used a little bit more reddy undertones like this. This is a sample sofa, one of our designs, and then some pink undertones on the rug. So I've just injected a little bit more colour because I need each room to have a slight different point of view. But it's a small room, but I absolutely adore it. So I'm now going to take you into our living space, super small, but love it. This is where we watch TV, hang out, big windows opposite the garden. I've got some pieces, again, you know, my vintage love. So an old vintage console here from India. The walls are painted in Madison grey, so it just kind of almost floats into the walls. I've played around with scale. I hate TVs, I hate them. I mean, I like watching them, but I hate looking at them. So I just knocked the wall out behind the TV a dark colour and then kind of put art and mirrors around and botanicals around, and they sort of go away. Sample little console here, one of our designs, but again, it kind of emulates this design. So it feels like they both flow and both are really earthy. Played around with lots of botanicals, overdosed on seating nooks. I got really inspired actually by hotels, because when you go into really cool hotels, they have zillions of little seating nooks and they look so cozy. And I wanted to replicate the exact same feeling in my house and in my garden. So wherever you may be in this house, you'll find a little nook to sit, perch, have a drink, not have a drink. It's just one of my kind of favourite little design things to do, to lift a space and make it feel more elevated. And then obviously lighting is key. So lots of little pockets of glow. Kind of kept the colour palette really restrained, although I've introduced a little bit more red. Old drum here, which I've used as a little table that goes behind my sofa. And then, because the red sofa is quite a statement piece, I've added an old vintage rug here. I shop vintage rugs from a brand called Morocco Tribal a lot. They have beautiful rugs and I'm constantly using their rugs and layering them everywhere. Again, because I like the feeling of layering rug over rug over rug. It's never just one great big one. It's like lots of layers of them. Very similar, in fact, it is the same coffee tables upstairs. So there's a real connection between the two spaces, and then just kind of layered it up with books and faux botanicals. Another thing that I find really important, I was going to say in just small homes or Victorian homes, but actually all homes, is the use of mirrors, because mirrors expand horizons and add depth. And whenever I'm decorating with a mirror, I really want to supersize it. So this mirror here kind of really reflects the whole room back at me. Again, I had a mirror in my hallway. It does the exact same thing. It adds that note of grandeur and it just literally expands horizons, add depth and so much intrigue. And yep, this is where every evening I chill on the sofa, watching the TV, or just lay here and looking at the trees. So it's a real integral part of the house and the best part of the house, because the ceiling is so tall. It just feels so grand and cozy, and yeah, I love it. Let me take you into the garden. Now, the foundation for the garden was this wall. So it's 2 stories high, it's Crittall, it's black. It's just completely changed how this whole house feels, I should say, because there's such a connection between the pieces that are out here and the pieces that are in there. And what I've done is, all of the colours that are inside the house, I've mirrored outside the house. Earthy browns, blacks, I've played around with scale again. So there's this real connection between inside and out. So you're kind of blurring the lines with, am I in or am I out? You don't quite know. And that's what makes a space feel incredibly magical. This installation of these glass doors literally changed the whole house. From the moment it was done. The only thing that it made me panic about was how integral the garden was, because I'm not a garden designer. And so I really had to kind of, knowledge myself up and try as much as I possibly can or could create a garden that felt really magical and beautiful and echoed the aesthetic of my interior. I very much wanted to create an outdoor room, so I've used lots of pieces that you typically wouldn't use outdoors, but they've worked really well for me. Old Habitat table, 10 years old, it's stone, it's completely fine outside. A chair that's made of plastic. I constantly put indoor plastic chairs outside. I've used the same brick that I used inside for a working fireplace out here. Then, this is an outdoor garden sofa, which has got a very similar colour palette to the colours I'm using indoors. One of the biggest, probably most expensive radical things I did to the garden was install this indoor kitchen, which you're about to see, by Woo. It's concrete. And I used to live in America, as I told you, and we used to, like all our neighbours, barbecue and grill outside, even in the winter. So you'll find me out here barbecuing in the depths of the winter. All Christmas dinner is cooked out here. I've got my Barbie, I've got my wood, I get my herbs and spices and oils, I've got all the lights going on. So I use this kitchen year round and absolutely love it. Let's go further into the garden. I should have told you when we moved in, there wasn't one plant in here. I mean, it was literally terrible. So we put down this paving by Millboard. It emulates real wood, but it's composite, so you never have to do anything to it. It's amazing. Created all these borders with all this lush planting, so you feel like you're in a forest. And then part of the trick of my design is I don't want you to see what's around the next corner, so you never can. So you come through here and there's a little bench where you can sit and have a little relaxation spot, perfect for peppermint tea in the afternoon. There's a dining table round here. There's another little chair by my cabin round here. And then this cabin, I love this cabin. I got this cabin from eBay. It was £100. And when I saw it, I bid on it. And I didn't even look at where it was located. And it was located in somewhere like Scotland. And Graham was so pissed because he had to go and drive up there and get it. Anyway, bought the cabin, painted it black. And now, in the months where I can't be in the garden, it's like my little zone for just writing recipes, feeling inspired, sitting on my chair, looking out at my garden. It just feels like this little snug little den, and I can sit here and see all down the garden. And I don't know, it just brings me such happiness, and it only cost £100. Over those in Scotland, but I just love it. Oh, and I clad the walls in this faux tile. Again, you know, I'm texture obsessed. So this feels like it's slate, but it isn't. And yeah, it's the tiniest little thing. It's only for one. Myrtle and I are allowed in it. Graham's not allowed in it because he's so funny about having to buy the thing. But it's my favourite thing ever. Let me take you into my kitchen. Now, I'm a foodie, so I love cooking. And also, years and years and years ago, in my styling world, I came back from America and I was a stylist, and Heston Blumenthal employed me to style one of his cookery shows. And I became really obsessed with how Heston just loved having everything out on view, because it just made the kitchen feel so cozy. And kitchens to me can feel really sterile. And because, you know, all of my house is open plan down here, I need this room to feel just as beautiful and connected as my dining room, my den and my living area. So how did I do that? Well, I put this shelf, added a whole load of nuts and pulses to make it feel a lot cozier, painted the wall the same colour as the workbench, so it all kind of just took off, just looked really beautiful, added little interior things that you wouldn't normally put in a kitchen. So little pockets of glow, some botanicals, some really beautiful ceramics. So again, I just didn't want it to feel really, really sterile and kitcheny. Painted it in an olive, which I love. And then the island, which is my favourite hangout zone, because here I'm cooking and chopping and I have the whole view of the house in front of me. In the winter, the fire's on, or the doors open in the summer in the garden and the trees are swaying. It's just my happy place here. And I've elevated it, you know, because Heston really inspired me, with lots of decanting little salts and peppers and lighting. Put a chandelier above the stove, which most people wouldn't do, but absolutely love it. And so it just feels like it's incredibly connected to every single other room in the house, because I've kind of added interior pieces. As I'm obsessed with consoles and vintage ones, put this in front of the window, great big old vintage console, layered it up with botanicals and another shaggy lamp. And again, that's kind of, it just gives me this feeling of grandeur in a kitchen which can feel quite sterile. So I think just adding these little touches really kind of, for me, bring the space to life and make it feel incredibly connected to every other room in the house. So the kitchen is in the lower ground floor and the house is east-west. So in the morning, I get all the lovely sun from the east and I can look out on my garden where I've grown all my supersized plants, and I have a really big pot. So I have the tiniest little loo. I mean, it's so tiny, you can't even put your hands either side, but I clad it in the wood, again from Ashwell Reclamation. So it just feels like it's really connected to everywhere else in the house. It's very sweet. Now, don't judge me, but hubby is relegated to working at the bottom of the stairs, and I have this massive desk upstairs, but I am the creative, and please don't judge. So he sits here, and when we have conversations and we don't get on, we just shout from upstairs to downstairs, and it kind of really works. But yeah, this is Graham's spot under the stairs in a little sweet little chair. And I have offered, in my defense, him to move up to my space, but he actually, funnily enough, doesn't even want to. Let me take you to the upper floors. Now we're on the first floor and come into the primary bedroom. So primary bedroom, I wanted to feel like a sanctuary, really super grounding. Used to have a wardrobe along this wall, but it just felt a bit energy zapping. So the closet or the wardrobe is now on the top floor along with a guest bedroom. And I've taken all the cupboards out and the units out, and it just feels a little bit more free flowing. Put a great big old console thing here, laid up with art and lamps and botanicals. Kept the palette in this room really consistent. I wanted it, in order for it to feel like a sanctuary, I have to use really earthy colours, and I play with verticals a lot. So I'm always using rather large pieces of art or ladders with throws over them. So I'm constantly pushing the eye up. Even chandeliers, this is made in South Africa from balls of mud that are rolled in the sun and then painted. Again, I'm pushing your eye up because that makes a room feel grander than it really is. I've overdosed on texture. The great thing about texture is you can never have too much. Unlike pattern where you have to kind of pull it in, with texture you can just add one texture over another texture over another texture. So the wall, these old boards came from Lascaux Reclamation in London, and they got dragged up from the River Stour. And this adds a really beautiful foundation to the bedroom. It kind of gives it this grounding, really earthy quality. Put art of a very similar palette over the wall, and again that just kind of takes it to new heights. And then really played around with heights with the bedside tables. So super little tiny table, and then a slightly bigger table there, and then there's lots of pockets of glow. Again, the trick that I do quite a lot is like all the window frames and the radiators and the walls and the floors are all painted out the same color. The curtains, I literally just toned into the whole room, so they kind of go away. And then I really wanted the eye to go to signature pieces. For example, this really beautiful carved console, or there's a little cabinet anchoring between the two windows, which again is like quite ornate and just feels really beautiful. I also wanted the fireplace to be very similar to my downstairs fireplace. So it's exactly the same surround, painted in a slightly paler color. This room is painted in a slightly paler color, it's hemp. And again, did very similar thing with the decoration. So big vase of botanicals, some vases, and it's a working fireplace. So in winter I can lay in bed, have a fire, read a book, and it's kind of magical. But with the wardrobe gone, I then had the opportunity to open up this part of the floor and have it as a little seating nook. And it's great on a Saturday morning if I'm reading through emails or I'm reading the papers. And particularly in the winter, it just kind of really comes into its own. The rugs, again, I haven't put rug over the whole floor. I've kind of layered rug over rug over rug, and really got obsessed with these kind of shaggy rugs because they feel incredibly tactile. And again, lighting is key to everything I do. So I think in this room, I mean, don't freak, there's like 10 different lights with all of their little pockets of glow, but they make the room feel just incredibly cozy and super cocooning. I wanted to clad the ceiling because I wanted to feel like I was in a cabin. So in my outside garden, there's a cabin, and I wanted that same cocooning feeling. And so it kind of brings the ceiling down actually, which I've never done in any other room, but it makes the bedroom just feel like a really cocooning space that you want to hang out in forever. And so I feel like when you're just dabbling around with texture, it just really brings this room alive. And then one other really important component to bedrooms, I think, is because the bed takes up the hugest amount of square footage in a room. In order to make it interesting, adding a bit of texture to the bed and overdosing on pillows. I know lots of people will go, what are you going to do with your pillows every night? But I just sling them on the floor and don't worry about it. It just makes it feel like a place I want to hang out in and not just a place I want to sleep in. Welcome to my bathroom. I love this bathroom. This took a lot of pain to get right, but I feel like I've really nailed it. So first thing I wanted to do, because bathrooms are quite sterile, right? So I really wanted to add texture. I've used millboard again, which is an actual for outdoor flooring. This composite wood that looks really old. Put it here. Behind it is the shower. It's an open shower. And in front of it is this big kind of stone bath. And it's probably too much information, but in summer I lay here and look at the trees swaying, and in winter I lay that way and the fire's on, and I love it. I played around with heights again, like none of the lights, obviously because we're in a bathroom, are electrified, but they're just purely decorative. So this adds a lovely pocket of gorgeousness, and its softness another level. Accessorise with faux botanicals. Everything is a very similar colour. Lots of people are shocked I've got a rug. And like, how are you going to step out of the bath onto a rug? But I always step out onto a towel, and it's just really turned this bathroom around because I feel it feels a little bit spa-like now. Supersized the mirror. I have a similar chandelier, the same chandelier that I had in the kitchen. And again, really restrain that palette. So it's blacks, it's creams, it's a little bit of green. Put a massive old vintage pot by the side of my fireplace. And then I've just literally used every corner. So the laundry basket kind of ties in. There's a little table in front of the window, which is kind of softened with a blind, a stall here. Again, you know, I'm texture obsessed. Towels are textural, stools textural, botanicals are textural. And it just adds such a layer, I think, of absolute softness. 2 more rooms on the top floor, a guest bedroom, which very much mirrors the aesthetic that you've seen in the whole house, lots of texture, really inky colours. And then I've taken another bedroom, a bit decadent here, and turned that into a closet. So it's an open closet with all of our clothes. So that is on the top floor, guest bedroom and closet. And it's one of the biggest decisions I made, putting a closet on the top floor, because I was worried about using another room for guests, but then I don't want guests staying. So I kind of said to myself, it was fine. That concludes the tour. Thank you so much for coming. I've loved having you come into my pad. You can find more of my work at abigailahern.com and obviously on Instagram. Thank you for visiting me. Bye.
Welcome Luxury Home Show. I'm Karen Howes.
And I'm Jane Landino.
And we're from Taylor House Designs. And we're super excited to show you our new project in Knightsbridge. Come on in.